Hi, hi everyone. This is it's a combination of Misha's video in the palace because we haven't finished with the palace. I haven't finished with one of the important exhibits there. It's also the recording from another museum, which I wasn't really planning to show you because the video is not really complete, but I will explain. And also a short talk about the area we are. So Constantine Palace is located not in St. Petersburg, but in a small neighborhood that kind of was a village, and now it is part of the city, but in fact it is considered kind of the outskirts, countryside actually, called Strelna. And in the 1600s these lands were captured by the Swedish army. There was in the 1500s there was a military campaign in which Sweden helped Russia, and as a thank you, they decided to take these lands from a Novgorod principality, which didn't really bother Moscow too much because it was far and Moscow was not really interested in developing those territories. So Baron Johann Skitt, I'm not sure. Sharon, you're gonna have to help me with that. I don't speak Swedish. I don't know how exactly to pronounce that. So he was given those lands, and he started building there a little, settlement. Had a little homestead there. So when St. Petersburg was established, there had been some Swedish settlements, mostly like small fortresses, and Strelna was one of them. And Peter the Great, in order to establish the city on the shores of the Gulf of Finland, he had to start the Great Northern War, right? And he within 21 years, he managed to defeat the Swedish army, but the first successes started even earlier. So in 1703, the first island that would be the future city was conquered, and shortly before that, I would say even alongside with that, Strelna was conquered. And while Peter was exploring these lands, so this is the Gulf of Finland. This is the map of 19th century, but it's not really that relevant. What is relevant is that Peter was sailing on his boat along the shores of the Gulf of Finland over here, and he saw a nice flat territory, and he thought it would be actually a good idea to build something on this land. And he was thinking about building a Versailles, which he had heard of before but hadn't really seen at that point. So he would see Versailles much later during his second visit to Europe. And he started construction. He wanted to turn it into Versailles of Russia, with fountains, with sculptures, with cascades and everything. As you know, that didn't really work out because we talked about it on the previous tours, that Strelna didn't really have enough elevation, and just because fountains in Peterhof, and that was the idea of Peter, that all the fountains had to function without pumps. So he needed this elevation a lot. He needed the hills, he needed the underground waters to be running down the slope, creating the necessary pressure for the fountains. But so Strelna didn't really fit. The terrain didn't fit. So Peter later on switched his attention to Peterhof, but there had already been construction going on. And what I'm showing is the photo from the 19th century. It says Strelna German colony. Well, I know we have already been to one German colony today, but in Tel Aviv. That's a different story. Basically, whenever Romanovs built anything, they hired a lot of European specialists, and those specialists would be coming mostly with their families because it was I would say, long-term job that they would sign up for, and they would come with their families, and there would be quite a lot of specialists, quite a lot of Europeans, and wherever the foreigners settle, that area would be called German colony. But it's not just German. That's basically it. And this is the photo of Strelna, somewhat 19th century. But when Peter started the construction of Strelna, that was meant to be that Peterhof, but never happened, alongside with the construction of the big palace, which we're going to see very soon, which turned into the Constantine Palace, Peter commissioned to build for himself a small Oh, well, kind of a roadside palace, more like a house by the road where, because trips would take many, many hours from St. Petersburg to these territories, about 6, 7 hours one way, and they would be traveling, royals would be traveling with the entire entourage, with furniture, with all their belongings, and it was just a long procession, a long delegation, and these houses that like by the roads were quite essential, like for stopovers. Well, depending on the time, and I will be taking you to this house because Misha happened to film bits of the house when he was there. However, it was not really part of the program, but he did that. But first, let's finish with Constantine Palace. So Constantine Palace, as you know now, is one of the venues where the political delegations, meet, where all sorts of negotiations on international level are held, and this palace was restored in early 2000s, and originally it looked a little bit different. We know that the palace was badly damaged during the Second World War. About 20 missiles actually hit it, which is quite a lot. So it was mostly just walls that were standing and waiting for either to collapse or we don't know what. But you kind of see the idea, you see the scale, how big that palace was, I mean is, and it was meant to be that big because it had to be something like Peterhof. Speaking of Peterhof, if you missed my Peterhof tours or you want to revisit, in September, you have this opportunity because starting from next week, I will be taking you to Peterhof Fountain Park, Palace, and smaller museums which are pure gems, such as the Museum of Personal Belongings of the Romanovs, such as the Museum of Bathhouses, how the royals would go to the bathroom, how they would wash themselves, what their everyday life would be like. So many, many things we'll be talking about on Peterhof. The entire September is we're going to spend there once a week with virtual tours. And uh, we know also, just kind of a reminder for those who missed the previous tours on Konstantinovsky Palace, I think it would be a nice way to kind of have a sneak peek, and maybe you would want to discover the previous recordings which are available on my website. Who knows, they're still there. And lots of interiors were lost because of the destructions, and also because during the Soviet period there was no really a reason for this palace to be preserved. And after the war, it was the Second World War, it was used as the educational facility, and the palace was restored, but not the interiors. That's the thing. And now we have only a couple of original interiors that were restored and look just like they looked in the 19th century, not even the 18th century. That's the photo of what was left of the palace after the war. Well, not much. I guess you can see that. There are very few original interiors. There is no original furniture. There are very few, I would say, items that are actually related to the palace. Nevertheless, the palace is nice, and well, this is one of the halls that was changed in the 19th century. Why was it changed in the 19th century? Because it was not a museum. It didn't have a museum status. It was just one of the properties of the Romanovs, and they used it how they wanted to use it. And Constantine Palace was used for, in the 18th century, it was used for big gatherings. Not as big as Peterhof, obviously, but nevertheless, it was also used in the 18th century as an educational facility. In the 19th century, it was given to one of the Grand Dukes, and it was a home to a family. Then it was neglected for a while. Then it was again, well, it became home to another Grand Duke Romanov, another Constantine, by the way. And it was basically a summer home, a place for summer vacation for the Romanovs. Different Romanovs could visit it, and they could change it just to their taste, however they wanted. Luckily, we have at least some photographs to imagine what it was like. It looked very more like, I would say, very much like home. And now it is more like a big negotiations venue, conference venue. For example, this is the Belvedere room located on the attic. It's completely the 21st century design, and it was intended for informal negotiations. So, for example, Putin met here with George Bush twice, if I'm not mistaken, and some other leaders for informal conversations. There are very few photographs available online, and the palace is still in use, but American presidents no longer and European presidents no longer visit Russia for obvious reasons. But yeah, well, nevertheless, that's the Belvedere. And whenever there are no official occasions, no delegations, the palace serves as a museum, which is great because they could have basically closed the museum for public visits at all, which would be a shame. This is another hall. It's called sometimes a square hall, and this used to be one of the concert halls back in the days. Nowadays, it's, well, you can see. So when Misha was filming, it had these tables arranged, for a press conference, I believe, or maybe I'm not sure. But later on, I also know that they disassemble the tables, the desks, and the hall is just empty. And I know that from time to time concerts are also held in Konstantinovsky Palace, but it was just a sneak peek because we have already been to the palace. I just wanted kind of to remind you of what we have seen so far. And let's take a little walk, a refreshing walk from the marine facade, because due to the proximity to water, the very, very high humidity level, plaster just does not survive. Plaster doesn't last longer than a couple of seasons, and then you have to renew it again and again. Look at this garden. Well, by the way, over here, what you see is the Grand Canal. This looks very similar to Peterhof because the idea was, and if it was first tested here, that the guests to Peterhof would be coming by water, would be coming by sea, by the Gulf of Finland, and then from their bigger ships they would change. They would change into a smaller boats, and then from the Gulf of Finland along the Grand Canal they would be reaching the palace. That was the idea, and it was nicely implemented here, and then it would be repeated in Peterhof. Look at the garden. So this is a French garden, symmetry in everything, nicely pruned bushes, geometry is perfect, flower beds with different designs. I mean, this is all very, very much 18th century. However, there were a lot of changes made in the 19th century as well. But the Romanovs tried to at least stick to the arrangement in the garden to the times of Peter the Great. But Peter, once he realized that he would not be able to turn it into Peterhof the way he just had this understanding, he forgot about Strelna and he hardly ever visited it. He visited the small house by the road, but not Konstantinovsky Palace. So it was only Peter's daughter, Empress Elizabeth, that remembered of Konstantinovsky Palace, and some works continued there. And well, later on in the 19th century, it would be the proper home. These are the so-called grottos, because in the 18th century, every fully fledged, proper aristocratic residence and obviously a royal residence had to have some sort of a grotto, which was kind of supposed to remind you of the underwater kingdom. To me, it looks like just a cave, but it could also be the underground cave. That was the idea. And yeah, that's the Grand Canal. The Gulf of Finland is just over there. I'm sure you saw, you saw in one of the photos I showed you in the beginning. So it looks very much like Peterhof, and Peterhof not really far from here. And for those of you who have been to St. Petersburg, and if you have been taken to Peterhof, you must have passed by Konstantinovsky Palace. My colleagues often refer to Konstantinovsky Palace as Vladimirsky Palace because it was Putin who, after receiving the open letter signed by St. Petersburg and Russian celebrities, intellectuals, asking to save the palace from deterioration and dilapidation. So it was Putin's decision. It was just his order to refurbish the palace. And that and it's kind of ever since those times, palace is called Putin's palace. And I mean, it's history. What can we do with it? What can we do with it? But we also know that it's a museum and it's open to public, so at least something good about this palace. And well, just let's not talk about Putin much, but just consider the history. Some interiors have been preserved, some interiors, some new interiors have been created, quite nice ones. And what kind of exhibitions are held there? Jewelry, mostly jewelry, and some private collections, such as Rostropovich and Galina Vishnevskaya collection, which we saw last time. It was the collection of porcelain and well, from the Romanovs collection and other Romanovs belongings. So we saw it last time, as well as some artworks. But there is another exhibition that was not open to public when Misha was there, which was a bummer. And it's up to them to decide whatever they show, whatever they do not show. I'm not even sure what it depends on. So Misha was not able to see the exhibition, which I really, really badly wanted to share with you. But we can still enjoy that exhibition. In order to understand what's going on here, I need to go back to St. Petersburg. I showed this house on one tour that I did about the fate of the jewelry of Russian aristocracy after the revolution. We know that private property was nationalized. We know that the aristocrats had to leave in a hurry and they could not take with them much. So in hopes, to come back shortly, many would hide what they could not carry with them in their homes. And some of the biggest treasures found to the date in St. Petersburg was found a few years ago in this house in the center of St. Petersburg. And part of these treasures are on display, on permanent display in Constantine Palace. But again, Misha couldn't see it when he was there. Nevertheless, I have enough footage because there are tons of photographs online, and the story is interesting, so why not sharing it with you? So this is the house belonged to the Narishkin family. If you are interested in Russian history and if you have seen at least some of my tours, you must have heard of this last name. Narishkins is one of the oldest dynasties and related to the Romanovs because it is related to Peter the Great. So Peter's first wife was Narishkina, and there were some other connections as well. So this is, I would say, almost as royal as Romanovs. And Narishkin family also immigrated after the revolution. This house was nationalized from them, and they couldn't take the house with them. We don't know how much was taken. We know that they eventually settled in France, but they hoped to return because they knew that in one of the side wings, this is one of them, they hid quite a stash. They hid hundreds, actually thousands, of items of this silverware, kitchenware, and cutlery, silver, gold, enamel, and whatnot. From time to time, parts of these treasure, would be taken to other venues, to other exhibitions, such as Catherine's Palace, by the way. Well, but the permanent home to this display is Constantine Palace. So it was a bummer that it was closed. But so these treasures were found, I will explain you a little bit later how they were found, wrapped up in the newspapers that are dated. So this newspaper, for example, is dated, it's Saturday, September 2nd, 1917. Here they're discussing some consequences of the Swedish scandal in Stockholm. I'm not sure what it is about, but nevertheless, they're discussing some relations between Sweden and Argentina. I don't know what happened there. Well, you're gonna have to enlighten me, Sharon, if you know. Yeah, and this is how they were able to date. Well, to date the exactly the when it was all hidden. Everything was wrapped up in the newspapers, and the newspapers were all soaked in vinegar. There was one of the rooms. During the Soviet period, there were communal apartments in the side wings. Not in the house itself, but in the side wings. And there was a room hidden in between, well, the apartments, um, which contained, was filled up almost to the ceiling with the sacks filled up with all this kitchenware. It was discovered during some renovations several years ago, like 20, I'm not sure, 2010s. I don't remember now the exact year. Maybe it's mentioned somewhere. And it was discovered by just a group of workers that did the renovations. And under cover of the night, they discovered it, but didn't tell anyone. There you go. And under cover of the night, in a kind of, they try to disguise it as just the you know big boxes and big bags filled with just construction materials and waste. They try to steal it from the palace, but the guards noticed that the bags filled with the construction waste sounded really strangely. So they stopped the workers, and when they opened the bags, they saw what we see now. And because it was all wrapped up in this vinegary newspapers, everything was in an amazing condition, like absolutely, well, it looked as if everything has just undergone the restoration and was polished and ready to be showed off. Just look at all these things. Because of this regalia, these are military awards, if they were able to identify the people to whom it belonged, well, they knew it was Narishkin family because it had the coat of arms of the family insignia on many of the items, but they couldn't identify who of the Narishkins hid that. And later on, they found out that actually those were the children of Narishkins and their in-laws. Look at this. So these are the teeny tiny charms made by Fabergé. And some cufflinks. I don't think this cost a fortune, but altogether the cost is 200 something million rubles. So that's well, quite a lot of money. I'm not even going to convert, so that's a lot of money, but nobody's going to sell it. The thing is, had these workers declared it, well, announced that they had found it, they would have been given 40%. Just imagine. But because they didn't tell anyone, they went to jail, and they are now imprisoned for the attempted theft. Shortly after it became public knowledge, the two descendants of the Narishkin family in Paris, well, contacted Russia in an attempt to well, to be given some sort of a compensation. But according to Russian laws, there is no restitution and there is no compensation for the property lost after the revolution. And well, I mean, during the imperial period, so there is no hope for the Narishkins to come into possession of any of these items, which is a shame, of course, but much to our delight, we can see these items, well, when we are lucky, in Constantine Palace. So, to whom did those military awards belong? It belonged to Sergei Somov, that's him. So he was the husband to the daughters of Narishkins, and they left for France, where most of Russian nobility went eventually. That's so that's them. That's the two sisters, and I believe some of. I'm not sure whose husband he was, but so they stayed in Paris, and they tried to live a so-called, well, kind of the, I would say, aristocratic life, but obviously they were hoping to return and get back those items, and this would have been definitely a game changer for them, but that didn't happen because we know that the Soviet states never really, well, it would last for many more years before its end. Let's have a short Q&A now, since we are switching the topic and we are now going to be talking about the palace, the road palace of Peter the Great. Let me know if you have any questions. In the meantime, the chat is open. So all this time, ever since Kisa left me, I've been just stroking her with my feet. And now Kisa is gone, but I'm still I'm still moving my feet, and I'm not sure why I'm doing this. Let me know if you have any questions. So Constantine Palace, normally there would be several rooms open to public, showing all these beautiful items, mostly golden or silver and gold coated items, big sets for big families, a lot of them in the so-called neo-Russian style that came into its own in the second half of the 19th century. A lot of items, some porcelain, but mostly gold and silver. I guess Putin eats his breakfast off some of those plates and silverware. I have no idea. He doesn't live in Konstantinovsky Palace. But yeah, well, I don't think Putin will be using the same items, but I'm pretty sure that he uses something very similar, and all these finds must have inspired him for for the interiors for his own palaces, which I'm sure which I think you must have seen on YouTube. But we're not going there. We are discussing Romanovs, and in particular we will be discussing Peter the Great. In 1970, oh, thank you so much, Sharon. 1970, Sweden faced public disorder and political instability marked by the potato riots. Okay, and broader hunger and military demonstrations driven by wartime scarcity and influenced by the Russian Revolution. Oh, wow. I didn't know Russian Revolution influenced Sweden. Wow. A major diplomatic scandal erupted over the Luxembourg affair involving the Swedish envoy's unauthorized communications. Addition allied to the public was shocked by the trial and the sentencing Hilda Nilsson, the angel marker, who was found guilty of murdering her foster children. Goodness gracious! I had no idea of that. Wow. Yes, Dolly, that was a good exercise. I can barely feel my feet now, but at least Kisa is happy. So we can go on with a road palace of Peter the Great. Ah, so you see, we both have learned something new. Amazing. Well, while I'm researching, I keep coming across interesting connections and very unexpected connections. Like today in American-German colony, we discovered the connections here in Tel Aviv, right, in the Holy Land, with the Romanovs, with Russian aristocracy, with MI5, right, the British Secret Services. I think I think it was MI5 that he worked, and with Germany, and then America, and with and whatnot. So yeah, this is amazing how it works. Absolutely amazing. So great, thank you so much for educating me. And also we found out how the American flags should be hanging, should be displayed. Yeah, many things. And that's incredible. Let's go back to Strelna. I remind you that the area where we are now is called Strelna. It's just the name that was given to this land, and it's first mentioned in the 16th century. It's first mentioned as Strelna in some chronicles, and ever since those times, this place has been called this way. I like Strelna a lot. It never has tourists. There are never tourists there. I mean, international tourists. I mean, like big tourist groups. They never go there. Big tourist groups were never really taken to Constantinovsky Palace. I have never taken a group to Constantinovsky Palace myself. I've never been to Constantinovsky Palace. And Misha was there for the first time this summer when he visited. That was it. And but that's I would say a pure gem. I only went to this house once on my own, and that was it. When Misha was there, he wasn't really supposed to be there, but it turned out that the house was open, and it's very close to Konstantinovsky Palace, basically to the side from it, like 15 minutes walk. And he still had some battery on his phone, which was not enough. So he had to film with the worst phone. So some videos of the house are of a really, really bad quality. But I hope you are okay. And I hope you're okay. I mean, we don't have any other option. It's either you have some photos or some footage, or you have none. But also because Misha was limited, I also added some photos taken from open sources. So this road palace was basically kind of a home to Peter the Great. It was meant to be, and Peter indeed stayed in this house, because only in 1715, this is when Peter was explained that he would not be able to turn that into Peterhof, and that's when Peter kind of stopped coming here. But nevertheless, on his way to Peterhof, he sometimes would be dropping by this house. So there was life. Unlike Konstantinovsky Palace, there was life in this house. For example, there is a small model for one of the future monuments to Peter the Great. This model was made in 1910 by the sculptor Leon Bernstam, and well, that's a small monument to Peter the Great. This monument, you can't find it in St. Petersburg. I believe it is one of the monuments for Peter the Great somewhere else in Russia. I just know it's a model. I just know it's not the actual size. The actual size is way, way, way bigger than that. And since this is early 18th century, and since this was home to Peter the Great, well, yeah, also the lights, they're not the best. So I had to Photoshop it a little bit. I had to add more light. I had to just tweak it a little bit. So the place has a lot of items. Obviously, it's impossible to imagine that the palace, the house or palace, it's called palace, but it's not really a palace. But nevertheless, I'll just probably stick to the palace word. You can't really expect it to have been intact all this time, taken into consideration 20th century history. Obviously not. Actually, when Peter's daughter Elizabeth got to power, she commissioned to just revamp the place a little bit, and also it remained kind of a guest house, kind of a roadhouse for guests on their way to Peterhof or from Peterhof. But now after the restoration, and luckily the palace was not affected in the Second World War. There were territories in the park that were affected, but not the house itself. And they were able to create a sort of an exhibition of what the life would be like in this type of houses in the 18th century times of Peter the Great. And as I said, road from St. Petersburg to these residences could take up to 7 hours easily. And given the fact that the royals would be traveling with their entourage, with the furniture, because there was not enough furniture, and there was not enough furniture in the residences. The furniture manufacture would be smooth, would be smooth only in the 19th century, but in the 18th century it was still, I would say, quite, everything was quite rusty, and there was just not enough furniture. So look at just all this. This is the illustration of the, how shall I put it, a procession of the monarch, and all the items, and the doctors, and the family members bringing their clothing, their furniture, their toiletries, and everything. Obviously this is the exaggeration, but you kind of have an idea. So these type of travels could take many hours, more than 7 hours. And yeah, there would be a need to stop over. There wouldn't be any drive-bys, there wouldn't be any inns and motels. We could say that these houses, stopover palaces, would be sort of motels from back then. For example, this is the photo I found online. These are the kind of the big, what do you call it? I keep forgetting this word. Not the trunks. Goodness gracious. Okay, give me a second. I forgot this word. And there are some words that I just sometimes just forget, because, as you know, English is not my mother tongue. That's a bit of an issue, but I will find out. Just give me a second. So what do you call this? Oh, chests. Okay, yeah, chests. So this type of chests, this was the very first containers for transportations, and also the chests would be used just to store clothing, bedding, and whatnot. This is by the way, the chest from the times of Peter the Great. It's not his, but it belonged to, it's contemporary, made at the same time, early 18th century, 1700s, and for a long time, actually, up until, well, all the time before Peter the Great and Peter's travels to Europe, Russians would be storing their items in these chests, just like that. And this would be used, this is kind of a case to transport documents. These are used for candles, the candelabras, and these are the shoes that were worn by the couriers. Well, there was no, obviously, FedEx at that time, but the couriers were still needed to exchange messages, letters, documents from town to town. So the delivery man, the couriers, would be wearing a certain uniform. And also, you cannot just visit this house on your own. You cannot visit the palace on your own. You need to join a guided tour, or you need to arrange a tour, because the house is small. And also for this reason, Misha was not allowed to use a gimbal, because gimbals in many museums, and not only in Russia, by the way, are basically the same as the selfie stick. And selfie sticks are the worst. The gimbals are not, because we use them in a very different way, but nevertheless. And this is the costume that the uniform of a Preobrazhensky regiment that Peter was, by the way, also a member of, and he was a chef of this regiment. So this is the original garment worn by one of the officers of the regiment. There are several rooms which are very small. Peter hated big spaces. Peter had fear of, he had a phobia. He had a lot of phobias, and this was just one of them. Peter liked small rooms. Peter felt very comfortable if he had even to lean, because, he was very tall. Peter never really enjoyed luxury, and Peter Hall, with all this splendor and gilded sculptures and whatnot, it was intended for delegations, for boasting, to show off, to show that the country has money and it's worth run business. It's worth running business with Russia. It was just to impress, to show off. But Peter himself, no, he didn't really need that. In this showcase, we see how one could spend time while traveling. Playing chess, playing cards, playing other games, that was very common. And in general, I would say that Romanovs like to gamble a lot. This is interesting, by the way. It's called Birulki. There is a game called, let's play Birulki. Basically, it's very similar to Jenga. I mean, in the way what you need to do. So you put one on one in a different order, these small items, and then you have little hooks, and you have to remove these items so that the other items from the hoard would not collapse. So this is the same principle as Jenga, right? I think this is the Jenga, when you have to pull out the bricks, making sure that the whole tower does not collapse. I think so. Or Mahjong. I don't know. Okay, I think it's Jenga. Well, let me know later on the chat if I'm wrong. And the game is long gone. We don't normally play this game. I only see this in museums, so I don't see it on sale. But the expression in the Russian language still exists. They say, why you... Так ты что, в бирюльке играешь? It's like, are you still playing бирюльки? It means, are you still doing nothing? Wasting time, sitting idle. That's the idea. So that's and these are, by the way, the original items produced in the 18th century. Obviously card games. And by the way, in the second half of the 18th century, at times of Catherine the Great, the state had monopoly for card manufacture, and it was a very, 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 well, bad idea to play one and the same deck of cards for 2 games. So each game, new deck of cards. So imagine how much money the state earned from the sales of the playing cards. Incredible. And this is the special game table. You see the chalks here, so you just can write a score here, and then you clean it with a brush. That's it. So aristocrats loved it, Romanovs loved it, so everyone loved it. This is a dining room. By the way, in every room you can see the stoves. Even though this is a summer residence, you know that summers in St. Petersburg are not the same as summers in Israel, for example. And plus, you're just by the Gulf of Finland, so humidity is quite high. Gulf of Finland is not really the warmest body of water, so yeah, it actually gets quite cold and basically just too humid. So that's why the stoves were much needed. So speaking of the dining room, this is somewhat mid-18th century arrangement on the table, but over here, that's something interesting, if I can show it to you. And that's the view of the around the house. This is the, as I said, mid-18th century arrangement, not contemporary times of Peter the Great. That's probably how Elizabeth would have liked it. But they have some items from Peter's times, such as I hope I will be able to pause exactly when I need, like this one, for example. So these would be used in times of Peter the Great. Peter collected porcelain because all this, great frenzy about and hype around China and, well, china bone, porcelain. It started approximately at the same time, and Peter sent a lot of delegations to China. Peter even attempted to hire porcelain makers to come to Russia and work for him, obviously selling the secret of porcelain making, but they did not agree. Peter liked very simple food. Peter didn't like fish, by the way. Peter liked meat. He liked, well, one of his favorite dishes was grilled piglet in sour cream with pickled lemons. Peter brought potato to Russia, and for a long time, potato would only be the dish of aristocracy, for aristocracy. Nowadays, potato is staples, staple food in Russia, but this wouldn't be the fact up until early 19th century. Well, as you know, in Europe also potato for a long time was basically used as just the flowers that you would give, to a beautiful lady. But later on, they found out that you can actually eat the potato if you eat it right, if you eat the right thing of the potato. And but for a long time, potato would be the food of aristocrats. I like also the painting. There are two paintings. This is not a painting actually. It was made with shells. It's just it's not a paint. I'm not sure. It's like an art object made from shells. So you can see that it was made in Germany. Peter brought it from Germany, as many other, by the way, artworks. Peter, not only did Peter collect uh, porcelain, by the way, yes. So this type of vases are from 17th and 18th century. You must have seen already some of the vases. Peter also brought furniture with him. So this big wardrobes, this big chests of drawers, Peter saw in Europe, and he liked them a lot. Also artworks. This is just some photos from I don't think it's a collage, in fact, because it didn't look like a collage. It's kind of an illustration decorated with shells, so it's not exactly a collage. Doesn't look like that to me. And so Peter brought a lot of artworks with him. Peter brought a lot of tapestries with him, and he later on established tapestry manufacture. Sorry for the quality. This is already Misha using his second phone, which is way worse, and he uses it as just kind of a plan B phone. But his phone at some point just died because he had been filming for hours before that in Constantinovsky Palace. So and nevertheless, Peter brought a lot of items from Europe, such as the blue and white tiles, as you know, the Delft tiles. He brought tons of them, and then he would establish the Delft-like tile manufacturer in St. Petersburg. He would establish the how shall I put it, tapestry manufacturer in St. Petersburg. Also, you see this type of chest of drawers. He saw it in the Netherlands, and he brought several. Big wardrobes he saw in the Netherlands, and he asked for them. He saw the scherms. Scherms were very good to protect you from the drafts, because well, there were still drafts, and as I said, Strelna, it could get really cold and windy, so you wouldn't want to catch a cold, and that's why so this type of shrimps would be placed somewhere around the beds just to protect you from the draft. The garment over there is from Peter's wardrobe. It's like his overcoat. The mirror. Some claim that the mirror could have been the wooden part, the frame, could have been even carved by Peter himself, because it looked very similar to a lot of lathe works that Peter did himself. So this is the photo, because well, Misha didn't really see the bed. This is not the original bed, but on the bed there is the bathrobe that Peter that allegedly Peter's second wife made for him. I'm not sure, nobody knows, but that's just as an option, I would say. There obviously, so as I said, because this house was used as a guest house for all sorts of, uh, relatives, honorable guests. From time to time, this house would be rented from the Romanovs by some aristocrats just as a summer house. So it doesn't really have, I would say, memorial rooms, but it has some items that belong to Peter the Great, and they at least try to kind of arrange it so that in one room that would be the items of the same period. And basically what you do, you just complete a circle. There are very few rooms, as you can see, because the house is tiny, exactly like Peter wanted it. You just go around and complete a circle, and then you go upstairs, and there is a kind of a big hall, and that's it, basically. This is from the 19th century. This kind of a bureau is from the 19th century. And in the 19th century, things, by the way, started to change. I mean, furniture manufacture wise, Romanovs put a ban, Emperor Paul put a ban on the export of furniture from Europe. Well, that's what I was talking about. So I just decided to find a photo and show you this type of, miniature houses were very popular in the Netherlands, and Peter saw it, and Peter purchased a couple. But you could also use this, like, they're called we call them in Russia, we call them cabinets. Yeah, and I was talking about something before that, and I totally forgot, so I got distracted. Nevertheless, yeah, and the about the furniture ban. And Emperor Paul, who was son to Catherine the Great, he put a ban on export of furniture from Europe, and that gave a huge kickstart to the production of furniture in Russia, obviously. And for a long time, they will not really find its style. They would be just copying the European style of different periods. That's just it. This was sort of the it was meant to be some sort of a small concert hall. It's now used as just a gallery with artworks. Some of them are believed to have been here in the 18th and 19th century, and obviously would be evacuated before the Second World War. And a lot of vases, 17th, 18th, and 19th century. So some of them must have been taken during the times of Peter the Great. Peter brought a lot from China. Peter's delegations, I mean, Peter never really traveled to China. Some of them would be gifts. Some of them would be made in Europe and collected also in the following periods. So and also Meissen. Of course, a lot of Meissen porcelain figurines you can find in the museum, and just multiple artworks. So we know that actually the very first Rembrandt came to Russia thanks to Peter the Great, and in Peterhof I will be able to show you exactly where the first Rembrandt that ever hit to Russia was exhibited, where was he displayed. I mean, not he, but the artwork. And in general, Peter brought quite a good collection of Dutch art with him, and not only Dutch. Well, not only Dutch. Okay, I guess it's time to have a Q&A and wrap this up. So I thought it wasn't really a plan to show you Peter's palace because it's tiny, and but since we didn't finish with the Konstantinovsky Palace, and I really wanted to show you that treasure trove that was discovered in the 2000s and should be on display in Konstantinovsky Palace, but it was not. So I thought it would be a good idea to show you this as a slight bonus. We have never seen this house. I know that many of you are interested in whatever I show you about St. Petersburg because you are interested in the Romanovs' history, and I thought it would be, even though the quality wasn't too good, but at least it's something, and it's definitely one of the places you normally, wouldn't have been taken to for sure. Be it war, without war, no, absolutely not. And again, I was there only once, and I've never been to Konstantinovsky Palace. Misha has never been, well, he was never really in either of the palaces. So it's a very, I would say, off-beaten nook of St. Petersburg. But there are a bunch of other places too. So trust me, there are more tours in the making. Including Romanov property. Okay, so the chat is open. Let me know if you have any questions. I still haven't figured out what's the better way to describe those paintings with. It's a painting, it's an illustration made with shell. I don't know. Maybe it's an installation, not a collage, but an installation. I'm not sure. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. So let me remind you that in 30-ish minutes from now, I am waiting for you to go to Harbin, to go to China, to do some time travel, because we're not going there real time. We're going to the 19th century, right? We're going to see what the life was like there during the times of the construction of the railroad and during the revolution. If you missed the previous 2 live streams from today, they are already available, but don't be late for the next tour. And tomorrow, 4 tours as usual. The Art Nouveau Museum of St. Petersburg, that's a premiere, we've never been there. Then Misha's Perestroika soundtrack with a lot of music videos and Misha singing too. Then I'm taking you to St. Isaac's Cathedral, and I'm taking you to Jerusalem, Christian Quarter. There's going to be a pre-recorded tour. Please just understand that in the old city, the connectivity is very bad. Sometimes in some areas it's better, in some areas it's really just hopeless even to try. So with regards to old city, I'd rather be doing a pre-recorded tour. Jewish Quarter is different, so I might actually take you on a live tour. Let me know if you would be interested in that, because it is doable, and it's kind of, I'm contemplating this. And yeah, so that's the plan, and here are the links on where you can find many more tours. Well, not so many, because I haven't been able to schedule anything for the upcoming weekend, but I will. That on Saturday we will be exploring more of Old Jaffa finally, and also I'm hoping for a sunset tour by the Mediterranean. So this should be okay, Sharon, noted. Yeah, I think this could be, well, a good idea to see the Jewish Quarter and then the Western Wall, to finish by the Western Wall. It's always nice. And unlike all the previous times, I will not have a heavy suitcase with me that I will have to drag all the way to the Western Wall on those steps. So I think, yeah, it could be a good idea. The only thing is, I don't think it's going to be a weekend, because as you know, the weekends are busy. Saturdays are impossible because, well, I can't get to Jerusalem on Saturday, so it's not so easy. So that's probably going to be some of the, well, business days, but I assume even if it's not convenient to watch real time, you may be able to watch it later. We'll see how to work around this. I'll find out what to do. Maybe it's a Sunday, we'll see. Yeah, definitely there are going to be some pop-up tours. I would say it is quite likely that September's schedule is also quite unpredictable, and it might be pop-up tours just scheduled a day before. Who knows, it might even be a very pop-up YouTube live stream, just 30 minutes after the announcement. I'm not sure yet. I'm trying to be as flexible as possible. So thank you so much for joining me. You know that my tours are free to join, but I would appreciate your support. You know that I'm relying on your tips. You can buy me a coffee. You can send me a PayPal donation. And on YouTube, you can find the recordings as of the previous weekend, including the second episode on Konstantinovsky Palace. And well, there's going to be more tours scheduled shortly, and you'll be able to find them on my website, anayagai.com. Thank you, everyone. It's been lovely to go to St. Petersburg in this way. And I will see you soon in China in 30 minutes from now, 25. Bye-bye, everyone.